Welcome to the KSR YouTube channel, and we've got another episode of Pump It Up for you. But really, for the first time, we don't have a game to talk about. This is the kind of postseason wrap up edition on episode 17 of Pump It Up. Adam Luckett here, as always, with my co host, Fat Cat Central, Derek Terry. Me and Derek just had a wild run. They're in Morgantown, West Virginia, at Kendrick Family Ballpark. I stayed a little longer than Derek. I was from Thursday afternoon till Tuesday morning. I was a resident of the great city or metropolitan Morgantown area. Long day. But with all of that, saw some really terrific baseball. I have to say, like, edge of your seat. Those are the kind of games that make people fans. I feel like, or make people want to watch college baseball more. We were just treated with absolute anarchy all weekend there in Morgantown. Even Kentucky's first game was crazy. So Derek, you were there on the scene with me. Just walk me through your week and how you all saw it unfold there with just absolute. I mean, an absolute nut house, no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, really cool setup. Hadn't been up there to their baseball stadium. Didn't realize kind of how new it was. And we'll tell you, did you notice when you were walking out the Brian Hayes?
I took a picture and I meant to send it to Jeff Drummond. I forgot about it. I did the first day. I took it, and then I was going through my camera roll when I was going home, and I was like, "Oh, I forgot about saw Brian Hayes in there." But yes, I did see that.
I saw that as well.
I should have known. I should have known at that moment.
Yeah, I grabbed a photo of it as well, shared it around, and everybody loves Brian Hayes. So awesome setup, though. And I mean, I felt like I obviously more tuned in to that regional just because Kentucky was playing in it. But a wild weekend across some of those regionals, but I feel like it was one of the best probably in terms of just how it played out. And like you mentioned, I came back home after Saturday's game. You know, they were 2-0 the days that I was there. Lost the next two, but even on television, you could sense how great the environment was, particularly there on Sunday night, but then also Monday when West Virginia walked it off. And it was one of the few times like it where, you know, maybe the only other time I can remember this is when they played in Omaha against NC State. But really, like, my whole Twitter feed, people that aren't associated with Kentucky, aren't associated with West Virginia, tweeting about that game, had national media members, maybe people who don't cover college baseball, but just national media people who are watching that game on Monday night. So really, Kentucky was in the spotlight, and I know we'll dive into the games, but the weather was phenomenal.
Yeah,
it was really a good trip, and I think for any of the fans that made it up there, it was a great college baseball environment. Really a great regional, all things considered. Got to watch a lot of, if you're just a baseball fan, you got to watch a lot of really good players play, guys who will play in the major leagues most likely. So I feel like it really had it all. A great time.
Yeah, I think they've got like a cool venue up there, and you can tell they've kind of invested in the program, and that's kind of, to them, it's kind of a crescendo type moment for them as a program. It feels like they've been knocking on the door. They finally got something at home. You could tell in the fan base they can kind of taste it. And also, I think football and basketball up there haven't been super successful lately. So it's definitely a passionate fan base on top of being, I think, hungry, wanting to see a winner. And so they created some, I mean, just crazy, nutty atmospheres, I think, in that game. And the fans, I thought, played a big role in West Virginia winning that regional. I think if that maybe played at a neutral site, I don't know if it plays out the same, but also it just seems like this West Virginia team has Kentucky's number. I mean, how many times can you beat a team that kind of way? I want to start with this. I thought they played some of their best baseball really all season. Like, you know, you want to be playing your best in the postseason. I don't think Kentucky leaves that weekend saying we just didn't play well. Like, I do think they played well. They got contributions from up and down the lineup. Not necessarily from the bottom of the order. I think that was an issue that probably hurt them overall, but the big dogs, I think, all showed up in that series. When you look at Jace Tarnish, Luke Lawrence, Tyler Bell, Hudson Brown, Ethan Hindle, Braxton Van Cleve, like the top six right there, which was the top six leaving the season. All those guys had moments throughout the series. Bell started slow, but then got hot at the end. Lawrence has a big hit. Van Cleve was awesome. Brown hit another level, I thought, on Monday. Really almost kind of willed Kentucky to that win. And then Hendel had his moment, I thought, really on Monday, too. Really with a few at-bats there throughout the game. So all their big guys showed up. And then I even think pitching-wise, they got really some strong performances from the bullpen. Jack Bennett was great. Niall Adcock was great. Ira Austin, I don't know what got into him there 3 days in a row, but that was as good as he's pitched all year by a country mile. Chase Alderman, that was the best he's pitched, I thought, for pretty much all season. Even Jackson Susie, I think, in hindsight, it didn't go great that Sunday night when he came in, but other than that, he was good against Wake. And then he really gave them a chance to win the game on Monday with a solid, soft start. So overall, I thought they played well, but at the end of the day, too, there was also their flaws showed up. And I think you saw that in the ninth inning against West Virginia. And I also think, Derek, to me, it's hard to numerically prove this, but I just felt so many times with this team, 8th, 9th inning, you need the big hit. It felt like they could just never find it. And that, to me, that felt like a thing that just kept coming up over and over and over again when you kind of went through the season. And I think it obviously it showed up there. You've got a chance to go win the game in the 9th, in the 10th, and you got a chance to win the game with your big sticks stepping in the box. Guys who had all played well that week and they just couldn't get it done. And it just felt like that was kind of, in some ways, the story of the season. Even against Wake Forest, it was kind of just tarnished, just running wild. That was kind of this team. They just could not figure it out. And then obviously the rubber match losing streak continued.
You made a lot of great points there. I agree with virtually all of it. You mentioned, was it the 9th or the 10th on Monday when the last thing that Owen Jenkins ever did for this Kentucky baseball team was actually get down a really good sack bunt and had Tarnish up the plate. He struck out, had Bell at the plate, and I believe he grounded out to the pitcher, I want to say.
Yep. So 0-1 count, I think. 0-1, 1-1.
But yeah, I think you hit on a lot of the things. I won't rehash it. Sunday will be the game that sticks with people forever who are associated with that game. Whether you coached in it, played in it, a big fan of Kentucky baseball, you're in a situation where the bracket is open almost, remarkably, that UCLA goes down. I mean, UCLA doesn't even make a regional final 2 straight years, I believe, for the number 1 seed that doesn't even make the regional final. And, they have the back-to-back home runs from Tarnish, from Bell. They're late in the game. You have the lead. Niall Adcock's throwing really well. And you're 3 outs away. 3 outs away from, we might be talking about a super tomorrow. And just an absolute collapse of a 9th inning. Starts with an error and compounds from there, a walk, base hit, and all of a sudden, they're right back in it, and that crowd's back into it. And it was almost flipped, I thought, Monday night, where watching from home, Kentucky staff did a good job, I thought, overall, keeping the game within Grand Slam range. I mean, it never –
Right. That's what I was saying the whole game in the box. They at least they're hanging around here where if they can just run into one, it's a totally different game. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like they weren't – at no point up to the 8th inning did I feel like Kentucky was going to win that game. And then it's just it's so sudden. 2-out hit from Bell, 2-out hit from Lawrence. And then Brown, first pitch, just destroyed it. I mean, just absolutely destroyed it. And then Handel works a great at bat, and then all of a sudden it's 5-5. And you're thinking, the way Bennett was throwing the ball too, by the way, when he came in after that, I thought, sitting at home, I told my wife, if they could get him 1 run, they'll win that game. I thought with how Bennett was throwing, and they had their chance. They had the chance. And then, Armando Guzman, my brother texted me and said, hey, he's just a junior. They got to deal with him maybe 1 more year. So I didn't verify that if he's a junior. I'll trust him on it. But an absolute killer the last 2 years for Kentucky. But my takeaway on Monday night, I tweeted about it, and some people agree, some people don't. I know it's emotional too when a season ends. But I thought it said a lot about that team to come back after Sunday night, that's as much of a gut punch as you'll have in a college baseball game when you're that close to winning a regional and then see it slip away like that. So Monday night, they fought their way back, got to a point where they had a legitimate shot to win the game. Whenever I think it would have been really easy given the circumstance of their ace coming back after he got knocked out Saturday, comes back. And they have the pitching matchup there. Their favorite, Jackson Susie, starting his first game at Kentucky. You mentioned, and he was really good. And I mean, Jelkin tried to gut through it. I certainly don't think he was as effective after that first inning, but you put me in that dugout and you got a kid like that who wants to go in, I would have done the same thing. And other pitchers stepped in there, and like I said earlier, Jelkin didn't let it get out of hand. They hit him around a little bit, and Lee came up with a really big. Maybe a double play in there somewhere. I'm trying to remember.
He got a pop up to the shortstop, and then he got a 4-3 ground ball when they had it was either runners on the corners or bases juiced. But they were threatening a big inning there, and he kept it. It was a 2-run inning, I believe. They would run it from 2-1 to 4-1, and then Carson Kelly comes and hits the solo the next frame, I believe, and that's 5-1.
That is right. Yeah. So. They did a good job to kind of stick in there. And that was kind of my lasting impression of this team. You mentioned it. All of the issues they had, we discussed throughout the season, well documented, and, came up a little bit short. We talked about it in the box up there Friday or Saturday. I thought the best improvement that this team ended up having, and I was thinking about it when I got home, that top 6 in the order, if you take out the 2024 College World Series team, which is obviously on its own pedestal in Kentucky baseball history. If you look at the other 3 regional teams they've had, teams that made the postseason, obviously 23 won a regional, and then last year and then this year, I felt like this was the best 6 they've had at the top of the lineup in the order. This was a legitimate. You had speed at the top of Tarnish. You had Bell, who's all around. He can hit for power. He can hit for contact.
Gets on base all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Lawrence, another guy, handles the bat extremely well. For Kentucky, it matters that he can sack bunt in the 3-hole. But he's also a very good hitter. Came up with a big hit Saturday night before, they ended up breaking it open with Hudson Brown's 2 RBI double. Added insurance. Shouldn't say they broke it open. They went up by 3 runs, though, in the final inning, which worked out for him that night, but not the next night, obviously. But, Hendel ended up having a great power year. I mean, Hendel's year was kind of his whole career up to this point, and he hadn't played a lot as a freshman, but last year when he did play, really good at getting on base, able to slug a little bit, but a low average. He turned that around this year. Ended up hitting over 300, best slug on the team, led the team in home runs, RBIs. We mentioned Hudson and then Ben Cleve. Ben Cleve's development there to go into that 6-hole and be one of the best power hitters. That was a legitimate hard lineup to work through, I think, through the top 6. And I know we'll probably get to it a little bit later, but as you go through that, that's a lot to replace for next season. Some of those guys that could have to replace. Obviously we know Lawrence is gone, and we know Bell won't be back, as he's probably going to be a top 15 pick, maybe higher. So the flaws, and they had an ace. We mentioned Jelkin, but the flaws, it was just so hard to have imagined that the Cleaver year would have gone this way. It ended up being, I think, the storyline of the pitching staff. It was just he ends up throwing 45 innings and 14 starts after, being their ace last season. If you got 60% of that this year, I think they're still playing. And
they're hosting. Injuries, we can talk about this weekend. They're hosting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I know the bullpen, we've done it on this show. I know the bullpens got crapped on, and even when the team gets the most attention, I feel like people that sit in to watch the regionals and cheer it on are probably most fans they've kind of casually followed it, but they know they followed the team close enough to know the bullpen's been a problem.
Right.
Really all year, whether they've tuned in for a random game or whatnot, but you cannot, because it was the thing with Harris too, and some of that his stuff was with injury. You cannot win a regional and get 4 innings out of 18, essentially 4 and change. That's just not a winning strategy. You have to get more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, not being able to get out of the first inning. That was tough because it seemed like he'd reverted a little bit, whereas they'd taken him out of the rotation. He came back, threw the ball great against Tennessee. And really that was it. He was the efforts that he gave against Florida and Arkansas, you could have really used against West Virginia, even that, which was fine. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was fine. It was enough to, especially the Florida game. They had a good lead, and another game where they got down to the end right there and couldn't hold on.
He gives them 4. It's a game changer. Like if he gives them 4, it changes. It just changes stuff. It's just easier to get through the game.
And Harris was in a spot too in that game. The way it was going along, you would have liked one more inning. He ended up getting knocked out there a little earlier. I thought West Virginia did a good job to get him out in that situation. But that ended up, you mentioned it, like a bullpen. Yeah, they clearly didn't have high-end talent in the bullpen. But any bullpen is going to collapse under what they had to deal with at times this year. So many starts.
Week after week,
yeah, where you're asking the bullpen to cover 20-plus innings a lot of those games. It was just going to be tough. I thought Bennett ended up having a really good final impression, I think. He led the team in saves. Like, he's one that I think on paper he turned out to be fine. But he really stepped it up in the postseason. And, he was somebody that I felt like all year, leading up to the year, I thought he was kind of like a safety valve for them in that starting rotation if something ended up happening. And it didn't ever really work out that way. I know he got the one start against Vanderbilt, and I think that outing he didn't get out of the first inning either, if I'm remembering correctly. So he did a nice job
first,
there.
But then got rocked in the second.
Okay, so another short
Madison didn't get out of the first in the last one. Yeah,
I was at that game. Yeah, I remember. Another thing to remember this team by, just some crazy games. I mean, high-scoring games. That's but then you end up looking at the 10-inning game there that ends their season 6-5. I think Kentucky probably would have hoped for a more high-scoring game potentially, or you might have thought anyway it was going to end up being a more high-scoring game based on Kentucky's pitching situation. But it wasn't. I mean, it was. I'm going to say for this team, 6-5 was a fairly low-scoring game.
Well, I didn't forecast Saban's throwing his best arms, like all of them. I don't think anybody forecasted that.
I mean, that kid comes back after throwing 100-something pitches and is nasty. 97 still with an off-speed pitch that was being landed. I mean, I did feel like what's tough is I don't know how much better West Virginia was than Kentucky. I do think you have to give them a lot of credit for their consistency throughout the season. When you looked at the lineup, I didn't feel like West Virginia had more high-end players than Kentucky did, but I did think the bullpens or the pitching staffs in general is where they were able to survive losing a game. Whereas Kentucky, we talked about it last week, whenever it was, maybe the week before, but like the pathway to winning a regional for this team was going to be to go 3-0, and they put themselves in a spot to do that. And they really, Sunday, were in a good spot. I mean, you knew Jelkin wasn't going to be used, and you knew Harris wouldn't be used, and you had to figure Bennett wouldn't be used based on how the regional, there might have been, I know I think you did a story on kind of where they were. It might have been for Monday when you did that, but really for Sunday, they had a lot of people available. Let me ask you this, Luckett. How surprised were you that Madison didn't throw?
I was shocked. I wanted to ask Minji on that. His press conference kind of became just more of a thanking the seniors and in the season. But yeah, I just wonder what that strategy was. That was interesting. Apparently on the radio show, he said the team voted who would start.
For Susie, yeah. Tom Hart mentioned that as well on the broadcast.
So I'd like to know a little bit more about that. But yeah, I was surprised because then why don't you throw Madison on Sunday? Because to me, where Madison has gotten trouble, I feel like free passes, but also that changeup can get lifted out of the ballpark. The West Virginia lineup is not that. Like, it was really oddly, it felt weird. It was like once you got past Guzman and Kelly, and I feel like if you got Guzman on a Lord, he's not hot, like that lineup is pretty manageable in a postseason type when you're playing a team that good. And then you go through some of their scores, and they've got a lot of low scoring games. West Virginia does, but to credit them, I think that the big difference was just the pitching was just different. They got two horses in the bullpen with Ballinger and Ian Korn. And then the starters are just – all three of the starters are good. And then even the midweek starter had good numbers going into the game. That was just ultimately the difference in what Kentucky could not overcome. I feel like, and their pitching just got exposed, and a lot of it was just the starters. It just, you just needed, if you get 3 to 4 out of Cleaver, they probably win that game by a couple runs. It was just, it came back to what I think what has been their biggest problem, and ultimately why they struggled on the games that Jelkin didn't pitch. Like, there's a reason they were like 0-8 in rubber matches. Most of it was because Jelkin didn't start in rubber matches. So there really was such a drop off from him to the next. It was just hard. A lot of times it was hard for them to even get to the bullpen. Now, there was times where the bullpen absolutely melted down, and Jack Bennett had a peaks and valleys type season. I thought, like, early, I thought he was awesome. You go back and watch the Alabama series, he was great. South Carolina, big game. They're trying to avoid the sweep. They get the lead. He comes down, throws 2 clean innings out of the bullpen, gets them a save. Louisville, he comes in and shuts it down in a big kind of midweek game when felt like the season was teetering in the first one. And then here, like, he had some really strong moments, and I think Niall Adcock, he pitched really well. I don't want to gloss over him, and he had some moments in SEC play where he backed up Jelkin against LSU. I believe he came in the Auburn game, gave them 2 or 3 innings. He ended up, like, Miami, Ohio was hitting them around in a midweek, and Adcock came in and kind of like totally shut that down, or they would have lost a midweek there, where if they lose that, they might not make the tournament. So he had a good year. It was good. And then even Madison, I thought, had some moments, but overall, it was just the depth I felt like just got exposed over the course of a season, and some of the defense too. They weren't the cleanest defensive team really all year, and that's disappointing, right? It's something you got to feel like Kentucky has to do. And Derek, I think I mentioned this to Jeff on the Rapid Reaction. I almost felt like this team was kind of caught in the middle. What I mean by that was just from like a hitting and offensive style, you could see they had like more pop than a normal Kentucky team, and it started to like change their offensive approach. But they also, I don't think, were as good as some of the bunt stuff and some of the taking bases, steals, playing more clean and executing, hitting runs, things of that nature. Where I think West Virginia was that, and you saw that where they were able to manufacture runs, I felt, more easily. And then when Kentucky gets in a situation like we're talking about in the 9th, in the 10th, specifically where you've got Jenkins gets the bunt down, like, and they're just not able to even move the runner at all. It feels like they were just caught in the middle. And it is funny, like, they get out of the SEC, they play the best team in the Big 12, and they're just like, I felt like everyone in the stadium was just like, oh, they could just hit a couple home runs here and we could get beat. Like, and that's why I think the stadium got so quiet when Brown hit one, over the damn facility building back there. That's why I think everyone got really, scared, specifically when Brown and Hindle came back up again after they were very careful, I felt like, with them and both those at bats. But it was just a team that was just a weird season in a lot of ways, and I felt like that was one of the more weird things, because I felt like they ended up having a lot more power than I thought they were going to have. Like, all those line drives Brown hit before mono, those things were just getting over the fence when he came back, right? It's almost like you got a little extra strength there, and those things are flying over the fence. Van Cleve, they're flying over the fence, and Hindle really kind of, to me, he hit a couple ruts, but he mostly did that all year, where every few games he's hitting a couple home runs. And then Bell's obviously, everyone knows he's got the power too. So it was just a unique year in that regard, because I felt like offensively they kind of transformed a little bit and became more of kind of to me, almost like a typical SEC kind of offense through that first 4 to 6 hitters.
They had the pieces in certain areas to, I think no one that I remember really outright thought they would be, like, I don't think anyone's picking them to like make the College World Series on like a national media scale, but they were always kind of like whispered about, like, oh, if you have a dark horse, like, could it be this kind of team? And I think as it played out, like, they had pieces of this team that I think were probably Omaha good. They had the ace in Jelkin. Now, Jelkin, he had the capability. He wasn't great against Wake Forest, but like what he's able to do and what he was able to do all season, even like in his bad starts outside of like Auburn, I think it was one of his only like short starts. He was able to just like log in
9 to 10 outs. Yeah.
He was, he never. So that, he, against Wake Forest, like, that was a good offense. I thought that was the best offense of of the regional. Like they could hit the ball out of the park. They were. It was an interesting Wake Forest team. And he was able to battle through, get him 6, I believe, even though I think he gave up like 9 hits and some runs, but he kind of battled through, and he was still capable of having the outings like against Florida, a team that ended up getting beat in a regional, but hosted, Tennessee was a great outing, and he had some others throughout the season. LSU was a really good start. So Ole Miss
he was awesome against.
So he had, you had a front end guy that like Trey Pusser was, it turned out to be a really good story on that 2014, but like Jelkin is a better pitcher than what Pusser was. And it was the depth on the staff within the rotation. That'll be a huge storyline for next year. I'm sure once we look ahead and kind of preview just a very, very early look at next year's team. But you had one element at the top, and, bullpen wise, I feel like I won't remember this team necessarily as like so much worse off than some of the other past ones. I mean, it clearly wasn't good, but oddly enough, I mean, outside of, what happened to Oliver Boone there in the 9th inning in Sunday's game, like I agreed with you. I thought they really had a pretty strong showing, all things considered, against really good teams. And like they didn't, they never played Binghamton in here. Like the teams they played in those 4 games were really good teams with good offenses.
Good pitchers too. They saw good pitchers all weekend.
Yeah. So that's tough that, I think the word I might end up coming back to when I think about this season, like weird is a great way to put it. Like they were never awful at any point. Like they never got swept. Did they leave you wanting more at points? Yes, I think they certainly did. But I know it's easy, like, because the season just ended and just have recency bias, but I really don't remember another Kentucky season like this where you had so many injuries, had guys that were out, had guys that just took steps back that you would not have thought. I mean, we talked about Cleaver, but Ryan Schwartz, who's in the portal now, like I thought he was going to be one of the best players, seeing him in the fall. And, he had chances, ended up not really working out for him. And once Braxton Van Cleve emerged, it was like, you weren't going to play him probably. He ended up being a defensive sub there in the Morgantown regional, but all these things that kind of happened, and they were like right there, man, like 3 outs away with a lead of being a favorite to get back to Omaha with how things played out.
Crazy.
So it's a big, on one hand, it's like, I thought about this a little bit with some Kentucky basketball seasons in the past. Like if a bracket opened, it feels like you really missed a shot. But in a lot of ways, what we just talked about, the season ended the way we knew it could. The flaws that they had ended up, they ended up losing in the way we thought they might. More so in that Sunday game, more so than the Monday game. I think in the Monday game, I think you have to be able to live with that. They had a great comeback.
You're playing them on your winner go home game in their stadium. You had your chances. You couldn't finish it. They did.
They beat you by a run in a close game. Yeah, in a great environment. Yeah. Like I can live with that. It's the Sunday game that is just, you got to win that game when you're up 3 runs and you had all the momentum. I mean, just from watching on TV, you were there. I felt like the energy was not in that stadium at all. Like it was just sucked out of all the life had been sucked out of there. And an error starts the inning, and all of a sudden you feel like you got a chance. Kentucky was able to avoid it. I mean, we didn't really talk about this like it, but Cerny ended up back in there in that finale. Cloud makes the 2 errors back-to-back nights in the 9th inning. Hadn't been hitting the ball great. I mean, he had the double on Friday to bring in the first RBI, and then I believe he had a single through the right side on Saturday. But Cerny ended up coming in for Lawrence on Friday, and then ends up, making a really nice play on Monday in that game. But a tough way to go out, but based on the season-long trends that we had seen, nothing necessarily surprised us with how it actually played out in Morgantown. But all things considered, I mean, I think they went out in a way that is certainly respectable. I mean, nothing to hang your head about with how they played on Monday night. You just came up a little bit short against a really good team in their place. And I was telling somebody that it reminded me a little bit of Kentucky hosting in 2017, where there's just an energy. And I know West Virginia had more baseball history at that point than what Kentucky had, in 2017. But just a fan base like willing their way.
You could just feel the hunger in the air with everybody. Yeah.
And I mean, it's the benefit though, if you're able, like this team, things are a little different. Like this should have been a team. I think this is a team that was capable of being a host, and it just makes things so much easier if you're able to play it at home.
And West Virginia was a team that just won those games all year, right? They just felt like they were going to win the games, where Kentucky had kind of lost a lot of them that year. And I think all that kind of creeped up in that moment. Back to the Jelkin thing, I think the thing, again, they were missing that frontline starter, and you felt like they had that Friday night guy, and it was just that you got that season from Jelkin. Like, you would have thought they would have had a real chance at. To me, if you tell me that's the season they got before the year starts, I would be like, well, they got a real chance to make it to Omaha then. And that you weren't even that you were on the bubble and had that year is really kind of frustrating. And that kind of, I think that shifts us into kind of what's next here. But first, I do want to say we're thrilled to have our friend Andy Ludicky sponsoring our baseball coverage this season. Andy is a big baseball fan, and he's excited to partner up with people that are in the baseball world. Are you sick of your job, ready to leave the corporate rat race, want to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, have a job, and want a side hustle? Andy can help. Andy's a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner, and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, passions, and financial requirements. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. Head to myperfectfranchise.net, or you can call or text Andy at 404-973-9901. And that kind of gets us to where we are now, Derek. It's okay. You leave this season knowing, okay, what's the next step for Kentucky? How do they go and build it where they can, host again and then be playing on this weekend again for a chance to get to Omaha? So, like, how do you think they have to kind of attack this offseason? What are, like, to me, I start with retention. Like, can you keep Brown? Can you keep Hendel? Can you keep Tarnish? Can you keep some of these pieces? Because I think in the lineup, you've got some really, like, rock solid core pieces that could really help your team. But it's going to be, how do you supplement that? And I think the pitching just stands out. I mean, the number one, like, how do they build this? Because that's going to be critical, and that's going to be determined whether they kind of sink or swim, I feel like, in 2027.
For sure. To your first point, I mean, I think for any college sport nowadays, like, you always start with whoever you feel like internally are your best players. You want to lock them up. Baseball is always a little trickier because outside of Van Cleve and Cloud and, someone like Jack Sams, like, a lot of these guys are draft eligible. So, Hendel and Brown, based kind of what I heard, I feel like those are the two most likely that they'd be able to get back. Tarnish, to me at this point, this is always subject to change. I want to caution that. Like, if you're someone who's watching this and you haven't maybe followed college baseball or the draft a ton throughout, like, these things are very fluid, and I can't emphasize that enough. But as of now, like, those are the two that I feel like they'll have the best shot to get back. Tarnish is one that it sounds like he's going to garner enough interest where he will probably end up being drafted and signed, but we'll have to see. And then, like, I'll tell you, the really surprising one, at least I found it pretty surprising. I think I wrote about it on Tuesday at Batcat Central. I've heard enough buzz to take the Jelkin stuff seriously. Not enough to put a percentage on it or anything like that. Just that it's not impossible that he would come back for another year. I'll put it that way. I think, if Kentucky's able to be competitive financially with whatever offer he might get, like, he's just got a weird draft profile. He's 23 years old. He drafted twice. He's had injuries. This year he showed a lot in terms of durability because he'd only thrown 46 innings of college baseball of Division I baseball coming into this year. So, if there's a world where he's serious about coming back, like, I think that's priority number one. I mean, you have your Friday night guy in-house. So we will see how that ends up playing out. He's one that, he withdrew before the draft even started last year. So no one's told me this, just to think about how these things normally work. He feels like one that if he's serious about coming back and they're able to meet whatever price he's looking for, I think that might happen again, where you don't even have to really worry about the draft. Whereas these guys like Hudson Brown, Ethan Hindle Tarnish, it would stun me if they don't go through the draft process. I mean, there's no downside for them doing that to see if they'll cut a deal with the team, see where they get picked. But depending on where they land, there's could be a world where it makes a lot more sense for them to come back. So I think, Van Cleve would be another one that, if you're able to lock him in and Brown does come back and Hindle comes back, like that's probably your 3, 4, 5 right there. Yeah. In some orders. Like you got a core to build around. I think Caden Cloud will be back. I know, this last impression with him wasn't great. He struck out. I think he struck out too much. I know, kind of let a little bit of that slide in baseball nowadays. And he does at least like have a threat to hit for extra bases. He can hit the ball out of the park. But I think he's going to be a capable player and one you would want back. But you're looking at a reset in a lot of areas. You're looking at shortstop, second base. Those guys are gone. They have no catchers returning. Every inning is gone. Taggart Tyson's in the portal. Owen Jenkins is in the portal. Ryan Schwartz is in the portal. He wasn't really a catcher, but he had to this year with how it played out. And then, of course, Alex Duffy hardly played at all this year. So they have Carson May coming in from high school if he gets through the draft. And last I heard, again, we'll see. I hate having to hedge everything, but you have to. Like, it would be wrong for me to say things that I didn't think would actually end up happening. But, I don't think Carson May is the most likely of this group to get signed, to get drafted and signed. He's probably in that top tier, though, of guys to watch for. So it's no guarantee that he'll be here, but there is a chance. And they'll have to go to the portal for a catcher. We know that. And then center field if Tarnish is gone. And then really whatever combination you wanted to use in the corner outfields, whether it was Marcy, Campbell, Hanson, doesn't matter, Schwartz even, they're all gone. So They do have Brody Chrisman committed from Akron. He's a corner
outfielder. Had a good year last year. Yeah.
Had a good year. I talked to him earlier this week. I'll have a story out on him soon. But, I don't think there's a lot of draft concern there based on the vibe that I got. But we'll see. So there's definitely a lot to do. And that's not even talking about the pitching staff. We talked about Jelkin. But the big name that we'll see, it's in your neck of the woods, Grayson Willoughby. This kid has pretty clearly emerged as the best player in Kentucky's class. One Mr. Baseball, one Gatorade Player of the Year. The case for him, because I don't know if we're going to end up doing another show. I don't know when we're going to do another show after this, but the case for Willoughby is that he's 19 already. So he's in the Tyler Bell mold where he's probably good enough right now. And he'll probably get offered a lot of money to sign if he wants to, but he could stand to benefit by going to school. And he's only got to go for 2 years. So with his age, there will be some teams that'll probably encourage him to go to school, see how he performs in the SEC. He's one that I don't know that you would bank on it, him being in the weekend rotation, but it's that kind of potential. So,
you see a lot of freshmen in the league, they do the bullpen thing year one, right? Mm-hmm. Throw a couple innings out of the pen, and then he's a guy year two. So, even if but that could be what they need, maybe as much as anything, right? Right?
Well, think about this team.
It can change your portal strategy if you evaluate it right. It can change your portal strategy, and then give you resources to spend to fill, one specific need.
Well, if you think about what the 2025 team had last year, Nate Harris started on the midweeks as a freshman, and when they had some struggles in the rotation, they were able to move him over. This team didn't have that. Jack Sams ended up being the best freshman pitcher on this team, and he hardly threw until the second half of the season. So Willoughby would at least be in a spot that, I think he's a legitimate option. At least if he comes to school like that, to me, that would be, whenever I do my little fall preview things, that'll be someone that I'll be watching closely to see how he's adjusting. Yeah. He would be a huge deal if they're able to get him to school. Matt Ponatoski is another, that one's a hard call. I think he's going to end up coming to Kentucky. I feel pretty good about that. But he's going to be playing football. He's not really playing a position anymore, so I don't think you're looking at him at one of those positions you'd be able to fill. But he does throw 96. And in the spring, I think he could be a bullpen help. So I do think they have some more high school options. Aiden Smith, Sammy Swank, those are a couple other guys that are from the Midwest that are, we'll see. It's just hard to call it with some of these guys. Mm-hmm. But you have seen in recent years, though, Kentucky kind of tilt back to where they're using freshmen pretty heavily, whereas whenever this regional run started, it was almost exclusively portal guys who they were using and older experienced players. So I don't know how well I answered your question, but like from the portal, like you're going to need a catcher, you're going to need a center fielder. And then I think there'll be a strong push to try to get this high school class to school. And if they're able to get several of those guys, like I think it'll be a little bit like this year where you could end up with potentially 3 or 4, depending on who it is. I mean, there's a chance that if a couple of these guys get snatched, then like there might be some other guys that are going to need a little bit more time, and your portal evals at that point will become very important, or just your internal development. Some of the guys like Ryan Foscolo, for example, who redshirted this season that I think they like a lot, but just didn't have a pathway to playing with all the guys that they had. You know, could he be somebody who is in line for more playing time next season?
Yeah, the one concern I have when you were going there is that's a lot of premium positions you're naming off, right? Shortstop,
yeah,
center field, starting pitcher. I want to start there. Like, I'm fascinated with kind of what happens with Nate Harris and Ben Cleaver here. Really fascinated. To me, that tells like the story of kind of this offseason, just what is the plan. I think with Harris, I can get there easier. I think there's real stuff with him. I think he battled some injuries. You saw it in moments. He's got to develop kind of his just being able to go longer in the game. Just his endurance, it felt like really even before the injury, you get it the third or the fourth, it felt like almost it for him, really for most of the season. So for him, I think there's something there. Cleaver, it's just I don't know, because the stuff isn't there, and you have that curveball. Like you see it in person, you see it on the like TV. It hits different. That is the slowest pitch like you will see in a college baseball. It really is. I mean, it really is. And so with him, he's just got to be so precision based, and everything's just got to be working. And if anything gets off, you feel like things can happen like you saw really all season. And so I'll be interested to see with him, would they consider just making him a lefty guy out of the bullpen? Maybe just what are the plans with them? Because that kind of determines almost everything, because they've got to figure out what they have with those two, because they both, I think you could say Harris was about the same as last year, maybe his minor step back, but neither one of those took a step forward like you thought they would take. You got a step forward from neither of them, and you got a legitimate, pretty big step back from Cleaver, and just figuring out that is just huge, whether you have Jelkin or not, because then it gets, if you don't have Jelkin, then it really gets interesting, just how you kind of build out this rotation. To me, it's like figuring that out, and then can you keep how many of the guys of the draft guys that you can keep? Tarnish, Brown, Hindle. It really starts.
I agree with you. Yeah, I'm with you on Harris. It's hard with his injury, even before. It's hard to know kind of how much that was ailing him before he kind of stopped pitching there for a month.
Or even after. Yeah.
Or after. Yeah. With that said, I mean, the fairest thing to say, though, is he didn't take the leap from, I think the outlook for him was could he become more of a frontline type of guy that whenever you left his sophomore season, you felt like he could command a Friday night role like he did as a freshman. No, I think the Friday night role as a freshman, too, to clarify, he wasn't the best starter on that team. He pitched in that slot just because I think it made the most sense for that group. I think Cleaver was definitely better than him in 2025, and really McKay ended up being, I don't think there's a noticeable difference in those two. Whereas for this year, as I leave this 2026 season with what we saw, I'm a lot more comfortable with Harris as a number 3. I think he's fine as an SEC starter. I'm not saying, to boot him from the weekend or anything, but I don't know how you could go into next season feeling like he's your number 1, and certainly don't feel that way about Cleaver either. With that said, 2 guys I would still want back, though, especially not knowing the status of Jelkin. I think Connor Madison will be back, most likely, from what I've heard. I mean, there's probably going to be a few more pitchers enter the portal, and just team-wide, too, I wanted to point out, I feel like unless there are some surprises, the bulk of, the names you would recognize that are going to the portal are pretty much over, I think, after today.
Which you could live with if you're Kentucky. That would be –
I do think – yeah. I think there's going to be a few more arms that go in, but to me, that's a sign they know they have to get better as a pitching staff. You only got so many spots. This is what happens in basketball and football. Like, you have a bad year at certain spots. Like, it's a new team in some ways the next season. I think that's going to happen for this pitching staff. I think a couple of the guys that you could probably count on being back, like Alderman. What does Alderman look like a second year off injury? Like, that's hard for him. He went 2 years without throwing. He was showing some stuff in Morgantown, like 95, 96. I think he was throwing 95 against Arkansas as well when they came back. So his velo was back in a spot where he felt like it was better there than what it was, say, against Moorhead back in February, whenever he was making a season debut. So I don't think it's totally not that I'm saying Chase Alderman is going to be in Kentucky's rotation next year. That's not what I'm saying. But like, as a bullpen arm, I think you could expect some better quality out of him. I think Connor Madison, it was an up and down season, but like, I think he's worth keeping around to see how he develops for another year. Berkeley Bounds was in a spot that in the non-conference he was excellent. Was not quite ready.
He's got a K rate where he's worth keep him there and see what you can develop. Yeah.
So we'll see how he does next year. With another year in the program. Jack Sam's good year. Let's see if he can build on that. I think Will Coleman will probably be back. I think he will be. It's a lefty. Leighton Harris will be back. So, that'll be another area where they're going to need to probably get some guys. They do have Cole McLean coming in. Cole McLean is fascinating to me. If you ask people around the country, like the quality of Kentucky high school baseball relative to Kentucky's peers that they compete against in the SEC, not as strong. And, Taylor, he plays at Taylor County, so he's not playing, in it's like the 11th here, where if you play in the 11th region, go to Lexington School or Louisville School, like you're going to see a lot of other kids who are going to play college baseball. I don't think it's quite that level for him. I could be misspeaking. My apologies to people in that region if I am. But Cole has just dominated all high school competition. And to me, I think it's not scientific in any approach, but what you always want to see, because I came from a small high school, like Cade Elam, who's at Louisville now, played at my high school. Cade, destroyed the competition. And like, if you're going to play Division I baseball, especially at this level, you want to see people who dominate. And Cole McLean dominated his competition. So I'll be curious to see for him as a lefty coming in here, how he'll be able to help out. So, they have some options, I think, in the bullpen, but you're going to have to go. Like, we know they're going to go to the portal. They're going to have to. They need to nail some of these evaluations. Been hit or miss a little bit over the last couple of years. I think they've had good quality pickups. I think Simon Gregerson was a good get last year. At times, I think Bennett was pretty strong. But, obviously Jelkin, if we want to count him as a transfer, it wasn't from last offseason technically, but he was clearly, a tremendous pickup talent-wise. So that's some of the names internally that I think you're going to look to make a jump. But on, the Cleaver thing, going back to full circle, like, he barely threw as a freshman, but it was pretty good when he did throw. Awesome as a sophomore. No idea what just happened as a junior. But I think he's going to be here. And I think it's good that he's going to be here in case he does come back to what he just was last year, because then you're in a spot that you're feeling pretty good about things. So definitely a lot to address, but I do think, like, positionally it's a little less clear just because the sheer number of guys who are going to be gone, plus guys that are draft eligible. Like, that one's tough outside of just a couple positions. I think everybody will be holding their breath a lot more in July when it comes to draft time for these guys positionally.
Yeah, that's why I think they're really in for a fascinating offseason, because there's a few key positions they have to address, and then they're going to ride out, some of these draft decisions, which could be pretty tough. And then just the Jelkin case, like his whole situation is really interesting in my view, just because of, it's a product of NIL in some ways. Like, you can get a little money here, pitch again, and then maybe, if he puts 2 years together like he just had, it gets a little harder for maybe people to deny him. Someone will take him even with the age. But one of those key positions is catcher. And Owen Jenkins, Derek, started 38 games. I think 35, 36 of them were at catcher. Was clear that they believed he was the best catcher because they kept running him out there. I think he was an opening day starter, if I'm not mistaken, and had an injury where he missed 2 or 3 SEC series. I think it was 2 SEC series, came back and was really there the whole time. He had a freshman year, but he enters the portal along with Taggart Tyson, Alex Duffy, who had been out for since the whole year outside of the first couple weeks. So I don't know if they have a catcher on the roster right now, like a true catcher. So obviously they're going to get that. But Jenkins, were you surprised by that? Was that expected? Just where was that all brewing behind the scenes?
I think really over the last like 3 or 4 weeks, it became a possibility. At least there was some buzz about it. So, no, ultimately, I think for people around the program, no, it was not a surprise. Based on my Twitter reactions today, it seemed people were pretty split on how big of a loss that it was. I will say, and this is bad on me for maybe not paying more attention. Like whenever I was writing that story and I kind of went and looked at the numbers, I didn't realize it was kind of as bad as it was this year. What's undeniable with him though is like he does have the tools. I mean, he runs great for a catcher. I think you can definitely see some more pop in there. Didn't hit really for any power this season.
That was the thing with me. Yeah.
Which was surprising that he didn't hit for more. Defensively, I didn't think they had a good year for anybody defensively. This was not a great catching group. The Duffy situation ended up hurting them pretty bad, I think.
Outside of Tarnish, Bell had obviously moments where he looked awesome. I never thought this was a good defensive team. I thought Tarnish was excellent in center.
Yeah, he was.
I thought Bell had some moments, but outside, and Campbell had he had about a 4 or 5 week stretch there where he was really doing some good stuff in left field. But he also had
he was a roller coaster out there. Campbell,
some bad moments there too.
Yeah.
So I never thought really all year defensively this was a good baseball team. I guess a good defensive baseball team. I think it was definitely wasn't one of their strengths. And then Cloud, I thought, had some good moments at third. I hated that it ended like that for him because that wasn't happening before the SEC tournament essentially, and he couldn't stop doing it there towards the end of the year.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, 3 of their last 4 games, pretty critical error. It didn't end up hurting them in the first West Virginia game, but I mean, it did open the door again in there. But yeah, going back to Jenkins, like just knowing how the portal works, given that he was a top recruit, given that you mentioned it, he just played a lot of baseball for Kentucky this year. He's going to end up somewhere pretty good, would be my guess. Probably stay within the SEC, maybe go to an ACC program. But it's not a guy that's going to be transferred down, I don't think. I mean, really, for that matter, too. I mean, I think Schwartz will probably end up with a decent market for him as well. But the Duffy thing ended up being tough because if you go back to last summer and you kind of ask around, you're like, what's the biggest priority? Outside of keeping Tyler Bell and Ben Cleaver and those guys, it was like they need a catcher. Devin Burks played a lot of baseball for Kentucky those 4 years. He was essentially the catcher in the back half of 2022 all the way through 2025. When you think about when Kentucky baseball was at its best, that was the guy who was behind the plate. So everybody knew it was going to be a big position. Duffy's injury, it's hard for me to say too much. What I will say based on my conversations, and this is my read on things, I never got the sense people were ever that excited about him. And it played out that way to where Jenkins ended up he had the most upside. Was Owen ready in every way? Probably not. But with where they were, it made the most sense to play him. And once he got back from injury, they stuck with it. That's who they chose to go with. And, now they're in a spot where they're going to have to go and find somebody else. But that's going to be, I mean, out of all the things we've just talked about, like this will, once again, for another offseason, will be very important who they end up with the catcher. I think you can sacrifice, you see it in the big leagues, like college, it's great if you've got the guys like, I mean, some catchers in college do mash. So I'm not saying it's impossible to find guys. I mean, the kid at Georgia Tech is incredible. So they will need to go find somebody, I think, that is the issue this year is they didn't have anyone who was like plus on defense or offense. Like, it's not like you were trading one for the other, right? Like they're just kind of average of both. Yeah. So, I mean, you'd like to at least find somebody that if they're not going to hit a ton, at least they can command a pitching staff. They're going to save you some runs. I mean, that first run that crosses for West Virginia comes on a strike 3 where it's not a wild pitch. It's a pass ball. You got to make that stop back there. So, that'll be a position they need to upgrade for sure next season. And then I can hear the argument, like, what could Owen be like in year 2? But ultimately, I don't think, even with how bad his numbers were at times this year, I don't think it was necessarily a talent thing that people were worried about with Owen. It's just Kentucky baseball's got a certain culture, and sometimes guys come in and it doesn't work out, and they move on. And I think for Kentucky, they'll look to find somebody that they feel will be a little bit better suited for that role and helping out a staff. And it's a huge position, I can tell you that, for Nick Mingione's teams. And I mean, they were probably spoiled to an extent to have Burks as long as they did. Burks is probably a great example, he was not very good offensively his last 2 seasons, but the intangibles were off the charts. And he stayed in the lineup because he could command a pitching staff and players respected him. Mm-hmm. And, it's a little harder if you have portal guys probably coming in, because Devin was a lifer at Kentucky. I mean, redshirted. He spent 5 years here. So it's a little tougher nowadays.
He's coming back. Now he's coming back. He'll be here.
Now he's coming back. Just 1 year away. He's only gone for a year. He probably wouldn't even got a full calendar year, and he's back. So I think this is a great time of year, though. And if you're someone that, I feel like you mentioned, all eyes are really, once you get to the postseason and you're still playing, you get a good crowd of people who are maybe more casual, checking it out. But it's just like any other sport now, man. There's a lot of portal stuff, and then you have the draft, which is a huge wild card compared to other sports, because you don't declare for the draft. You just if you're draft eligible, you can get picked, and then you got to make a decision from there what they're going to do. And for this team, and I talked about it, maybe even one of our very first episodes when we were kind of previewing how the season was going to be. It's been shaping up for a while based on how good this recruiting class was coming out of high school, and just the sheer number of draft eligible guys that they have on this year's team, that this draft is always going to be very consequential to how the next season goes. And as we speak, it's 5 weeks away, I think, for the draft. So you'll be seeing some movement in the portal, but the final product for this team is still well over a month away from knowing what they're going to look like going into August when school starts back.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's going to be a wave we have to ride. But one thing I do want to throw out here, and this isn't really even a draft thing, I think you look back at this year's team, Derek, and they just did not get enough from the portal. They just had some, I guess you could call them misses. Tyler Cerny, high expectations, came up short, obviously. I mean, he wasn't even starting for really most of the SEC play. Campbell was a guy you felt like they really liked. It just never couldn't stay in the lineup. Strikeout rate was really, really high. Tarnish was terrific hit. But Duffy didn't come together for you. Bennett was up and down. Bennett and Madison, I felt like, were up and down, but they both had some good moments. So I'm not going to say they weren't home runs, I don't think, from a portal perspective, but solid hits for you there. Jackson Susie, I thought, had a fine year. Nothing spectacular, but overall, it felt like they had too many misses in the portal, and they really cannot afford to have that this year. Cerny's the big one for me. Just stands out because that was supposed to be your guy at third. And we're talking about the top 6 in the lineup. And if you were getting the Cerny you thought from Indiana, that's a hell of a top 7. And that just never really came together.
Yeah, he was incredibly consistent across 3 seasons when he was at Indiana. And in fairness to him, if we're giving an out to some other guys, we mentioned Nate Harris's injury. Tyler was a guy who had a hamstring injury early in the season against St. John's and never really returned to that kind of form whenever he got back. But no, I think your point is well taken at large. This, when you think about kind of who was there in those big moments late in the season, it was guys that had been here outside of Van Cleve, and you mentioned Tarnish. So, your 1 hitter and your 6 hitter were newcomers this year, whereas Bell, Lawrence, Brown, and Hendel, guys who have been here, guys who have developed within your program. And, it's just tricky. I think Cloud, you add a guy like this, and you have to make the decision at some point. Do you ride with Cerny or do you go with the upside? And I think at a point they just decided that there wasn't a big enough difference between the two. So at the very least, you're going to be getting experience for one of your likely future starters. And that wasn't really the case for the Campbells of the world, because they were all seniors. Will Marcy getting a chance to get back in there? Carson Hansen, Hansen didn't. He was another one that, he's not a transfer guy like we were talking about, but another one that really didn't take a huge leap from year 1 to year 2. Like what he did in Clemson last year in the regional was really exciting, and he did it. He had big moments. He hit the home run against Arkansas.
2 grand slams.
Yeah, like I'm not saying he was a bad player or anything. It's just he was another one that just did. He was kind of the same, year over year. But they will need to have a little bit better portal class, I do think. But if they can get some more of these high upside freshmen to come in here, though, and this is, if you've not followed the program that closely, buy the rankings and take those for what they're worth in baseball. I've never thought they were as solid as like the football and basketball rankings that On3 or 24/7 or whoever does, but they're 18th nationally. This is a very good class. It's one of the highest ranked classes they've had come out of high school in many years. And they have a junior college kid, Jimmy Anderson, who had a phenomenal year at junior college and is probably capable of coming in and being a starter if he gets to school. So I think they're going to end up with, needing a high school class that if they can get a few of these guys in here, they're going to have a real shot to play, similar to how this class just was. But, yeah, I mean, I look at the portal arms more so than, the position players. It's going to matter, but I think I could see some freshmen, having a better chance there. Whereas with the portal, like you're going to need some arms. And we talked about the Harrison Cleaver thing. Like, is there a spot here to just try to go find the best starter possible that you can like reasonably get from the portal and just not even really view it as insurance, but feel like you've got it? I mean, I think that might be actually the play, just to give yourself some insurance on Jelkin until you see what happens there. Can you go find somebody better than Ben Cleaver or better than Nate Harris? Like that, to me, that's a pretty logical and reasonable goal to think. At least one. I'm not saying you have to go replace the whole rotation, but can you find one guy that you like? And then, the internal development will be interesting, but you're going to have, this is actually shaping up like it to be a pretty big portal class, most likely. I mean, they're going to end up with double-digit guys leaving the program. They had a decently big senior class, really. I think it was 10 with Duffy, but if he's sticking around for another year, then it was 9 guys who are gone, and we're already, I think Kentucky's already up to 9 in the portal officially. So already 18 spots available. There's going to be a few more portal guys at least. So got to assume not all 11 signees are going to get here. So let's say that it's more like 8 or 9. I mean, you're going to end up with quite a bit of space here to bring some guys in.
It's going to be a fun off season, and we'll be here to cover it all. Our weekly schedule is going to end here for Pump It Up, but we are probably going to get together around the draft. Just kind of preview that, maybe preview or recap, see what works best there, and just talk about the portal class and the roster at that point. But the coverage is not stopping. Derek will be pumping out stuff over at Backcat Central. I'll have a bunch of stuff up at KSR. We'll be covering all the moves. But for all you listeners, thank you so much for following us along here at Pump It Up this season, first season. We will be back again next year. That's the plan. And we'll get to see here what Nick Mingione and his staff can do. They've added a couple assistants here with Kentucky Ties. So we're setting up to be a pretty important big offseason. And I think if the right pieces come together, you can see this team having a chance to do some things. But like Derek just mentioned there's a lot of moving parts. And so some of this takes time, and we got to ride the wave. And that's what's ahead of us here, Derek.
I just want to echo what you said. I had a great time doing this year every week. I mean, we talked about the season as a whole, but getting to hang out with you a little bit in Morgantown was fun too. I'm not seeing you nearly as much since I left the sports writing world full time. So it's always fun to get back in and hang out for a weekend. And certain things happen that remind you why you leave. Like, I texted you, end up having a flat tire on my way back home. Just things like that happen that if I was just sitting in the house all day, I wouldn't have to worry about as much. But great time, interesting season. And I think Kentucky baseball has reached the point where, being an SEC program that's won as much as they have the last 4 years, like they're in an interesting spot. Like I think there's a lot of good players that are interested in playing here. And I think they're at the point of as a program where, they're not like reloading necessarily, but like they're going to be interesting next year. I think there's going to be plenty to talk about. They're going to have some really good players. It's just, in some ways we don't know who they are yet. And that's part of the fun and following it this offseason.
They need a couple things to go their way, but also if a couple things don't go their way, that doesn't mean next year is going to be a disaster. Like they'll be in the mix and interesting regardless. And that was one thing about this team specifically, this team was not boring. Like, of all the teams I've covered, it was one of the most unboring teams. You never the stuff, even the stuff you knew, it would still get just absolutely crazy. I think the Arkansas series is a perfect example of that. Fall behind 10-0, and then but it was kind of the return of them blowing a 7-0 lead against LSU and losing by a touchdown and a field goal there in Baton Rouge. It was just, they were an entertaining bunch that really entertained us all the way to the end, and I think they've got a chance to be an entertaining bunch next year. We'll be here to cover it all, the build, and then what it looks like and all of that good stuff before we roll around to a cold February weekend series where they're, heck, who knows? They're up in Akron playing someone, wherever Nick Minchie schedules. Steve Sabins was joking. They usually go chase somewhere warm. I'm like, man, they've been to like Elon and UNC Greensboro and Evansville. They're just going for the RPI number, buddy. So wherever that is, they'll play them early in the season.
Well, the one thing we didn't talk about, we don't have to jump back into it here while we're wrapping up, but I just want to go on the record. These two teams need to meet. I don't know if it's in Huntington or somewhere over there, but like, you got to get Kentucky and West Virginia together. They just, was it, maybe it was you that said it or someone else, but like, they just play bangers whenever they're playing. Like, it is. It's just great baseball games. Every game they play, every game the last 2 years has been decided by at least 2 runs. They're close enough. Like, I would love to see it. It's a fun little, like, I think there's a mutual respect, I feel like, for both programs. And with that said, Steve Sabins is being courted by South Carolina. Don't think he's ultimately going to go there. He feels like the guy's going to stay. Like, he's just now kind of getting the reward, for building the program. They've got a great chance to get to Omaha. So I don't know if he's going to leave yet, but like, the coaches both went to the same college. Like, it just makes too much sense, I think, not to get these two on the schedule.
Yeah, Sabins called the games a bar fight, and I thought that was kind of a good way to categorize it, because it was just, you just didn't know what was going to happen with these two. I mean, they were just throwing haymakers, just punching with their eyes closed, swinging as hard as they could to see what stuck, and that was kind of what it was. Fun baseball, fun season. Thanks to all of y'all for following along with us here at Pump It Up. This is not goodbye, but see you later. We'll be back again probably in a month or so, recap the portal, and then we'll have some stuff leading into the next season. But before you know it, another college baseball season will be here, and we'll be back for our weekly run through the season, and it probably won't be boring again. But for Derek Terry, this is Adam Luckett. We'll see y'all next time.